Before yesterday, Donald Trump had not visited the U.S. Capitol since before the deadly January 6th insurrection that he had incited in hopes of overturning a Democratic election and staying in power. It was an insurrection in which even Republican lawmakers scattered and sheltered in fear for their lives. And at the time, some Republican leaders harshly condemned Trump for it.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day.
Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful.
So you may have heard that Trump returned to the scene of the crime yesterday at the invitation of House and Senate Republicans who not only greeted him as a victor, but tried to retcon their earlier criticisms of Trump's tyranny.
Senator, how was it seeing the former president?
We had a good meeting. Yeah, we shook hands a few times. He took questions from the audience, and it was an entirely positive session.
Everybody in that room is dying for him to get back in office. It was the single best meeting I've ever seen between the United States Republican senators and President Trump, and I can't wait to have him back.
Incredibly, that glowing reception from former Trump critics in the party was just the tip of a massive kiss-up iceberg, as Republican senators feted Trump with a birthday cake a day ahead of his 78th birthday, and then they lined up to applaud and sing the praises of a dear leader who currently holds no office, but does hold complete sway over their reelection efforts, even as he awaits sentencing for his Manhattan election interference conviction.
He's electric. He's got an incredible fastball. And I think that was just exciting after all he'd been through, how strong this man is.
He was the team captain, and we were glad he was leading us.
He said very complimentary things about all of us. We had sustained applause. He said, I'm doing a very good job. I mean, we're grateful for that.
One of my favorite speeches. He came in, talked to the conference, was very honest. He was funny. He was joking around constantly with everyone. He was really sweet to me.
He was electric, boogie woogie. A lot of mainstream media reporting seems to be at a loss as to how to frame yesterday's bizarre, unprecedented Republican embrace of Trump and his 34 felony convictions. A lot of it read like this social media post from the Associated Press, who went crazy with the adjectives, calling it a triumphant return that energized Republicans who were reinvigorated by his White House bid. But if you zoom out for the big picture here, it's hard to argue with this description of the day's events. From Talking Points memo publisher Josh Marshall on social media, quote, Pyongyang moment in the rotunda, the maniacal clapping in unison, Marjorie Taylor Greene almost breaking down in tears because Trump smiled at her, total North Korean vibe. Remember, Donald Trump is a man who, as president, showered praise on North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un, exchanging love letters with him and pining for the kind of deference that Kim got from his subjects.
Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Nobody in North Korea would dare to think of indicting or convicting Kim Jong-un for his crimes, right? To Donald Trump, that's respect. But you already knew this. You probably remember during his presidency, there were plenty of ways Trump tried to emulate dictators and strongmen. It was evident in the behavior that got him impeached twice and his burning desire for a self-glorifying Soviet-style military parade with tanks celebrating him in the streets of Washington, an idea that his top generals had to talk him out of. Those elements have always been there. But the difference now is that Donald Trump is a convicted criminal who is facing several more serious criminal trials, and he is desperate to avoid jail, to bend the entire American justice system to accommodate him, his past crimes, and any possible future ones. And the Republican Party is prostrating itself before him, ready to help him in that task. Former Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Gonell was beaten by rioters with a flagpole while defending the Capitol on January 6th. He writes about this in his book, American Shield, The Immigrant Sergeant Who Defended Democracy. He joins me now. Aquilino, thank you so much for your service.
Thanks for having me here, Jason. Today.
I want to start with this. I've also interviewed Harry Dunn. I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you all did, what you continue to suffer. Just your first reaction to seeing Donald Trump, the man responsible for that violence, walking back into the Capitol building, not in handcuffs, not in a jumpsuit. How does that make you feel?
It's very disappointing. All the sacrifices that we did on January 6th to keep all those same members that yesterday applauded and greeted the former president as if he did something great at the Capitol. They were running for their lives, and they seem to forget how fearful they were running for their lives on that day. It's astounding that, instead of giving the police officers that type of recession, they had chosen to give that to the former president, the same guy who put their lives and our lives at risk. Unfortunately, that's it can't depend on the Republican elected officials any longer to defend the Constitution or the democracy, because they only had fealty for one person, and that person is Donald Trump.
I want to ask you a little bit about this, because this is the part that gets me. And I certainly couldn't be any angrier than you. I wasn't there. You were making mine, all of our audience's life safe.
Trying to keep it down.
Yeah. It's infuriating to me, not just because of Trump, but how did it feel seeing these senators and congressmen? Because as you said, they're hiding behind desks. They're begging you. They're running down the hallway asking to stay in your apartment, right? And here they are praising this same guy. Your friends who are still there, working there, does that make it difficult to go to work knowing that these cowards?
It does. I mean, one of the things that happened after January 6th is that I lost my career because of that horrible day. And when I was still in the process of recovering, I had this struggle in my mind, like, okay, what if there's another January 6th? Are the Republican elected officials, are they going to have my back to help me close the doors? Or do I have to watch the threat in front of me and them behind me?
Right.
So how can I do my job in a neutral way, in an impartial way, that I do, a split-second decision that is probably going to cost somebody's life, or either mine or theirs, or the member themselves. And some of these members, on January 6th, they knew who put their lives at risk.
Right.
And we did our job. We protected both elected officials, both from Republican and Democrat, the same. I protected your elected officials just the same way I protected Marjorie Greene or AOC or Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer. We don't care. And I can only wonder how the officer feel yesterday, because it bothers me, and I wasn't even there. And instead of holding him accountable for it, instead of showing him and denouncing him, they had chosen to welcome him as a hero, as if he did something great. What was so great about an attack on the Capitol?
Right.
What was so great? And, about offering pardons for the same people, blanket pardons for the rioters who attacked the police officers, and now, like you said, he wants people to stand at attention, like a dictator, flirting with authoritarianism, and you have the whole backing of the Republican Party. That's not Ronald Reagan's party anymore.
Oh, no, not at all. And I want to highlight this, because it's not just national. That's one of the things I think people need to understand. It's not just the cowardly Republicans and the seditionists who are in office. You were actually booed. You and Officer Dunn were booed at the Pennsylvania State House. I know Harry. I've now met you. How did that feel? Because it's one thing, again, to have these sort of cowardly seditions, but to go to a state house of regular men and women who you would think would understand what you do more. How did that feel? And what do you think that says about where we are in America right now?
Those elected officials from the Republican side in Pennsylvania who chose to walk and literally turn their back on former officers who defended their colleagues at the Capitol, they don't have no conscience about what we did. And if they did realize what we did on January 6th to keep all the mob, all members of the mob away from the Capitol and actually saving their colleagues, they would be more receptive to what we had to say. And, we were there just to observe the chamber, and we were not going to give a speech. That was not our point. But the mere fact that they recognized all the people that were in the chamber, all their visitors, and then when our name came up, they decided to walk away and jeer at us for no reason. That was, to me, a slap in the face of sacrifices that we did on January 6th. We were officers at that time, right? And they seemed to do the usual of election talking points that we support the police, and they don't. If they did, they would have met with us, at least give us a chance to have a conversation, but they were not even willing to do that.
And show you the respect that you absolutely deserve. First off, thank you so very much for your time. You are an American hero. Former U.S. Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Gonell, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Today, we got confirmation that the Supreme Court is fully in the pocket of the far right. In fact, they're even further to the right than former President Donald Trump. In 2017, a gunman opened fire on a crowd of people at a music festival in Las Vegas. More than 850 people were injured and 60 died. The shooter managed to fire 1,000 rounds in about 11 minutes because 12 of his rifles were outfitted with bump stocks, devices that allow semi-automatic weapons to fire bullets faster. In the aftermath and under pressure, the Trump administration enacted a ban on bump stocks. But today, the Supreme Court ruled that one small protection against gun violence was too much, striking down the ban. Senator Chris Murphy is a Democrat from Connecticut. He's one of the leading voices in the fight against gun violence, and he joins me now. Senator, I want to thank you. As someone who has been frighteningly close to multiple mass shootings at multiple universities that I have attended and worked at, I want to personally thank you for the work that you have done about this epidemic and this crisis in this country. I'll start with this. What is your reaction to the Supreme Court's just naked dismissal of the gun crisis that our country is in right now?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm sorry for your experience. Unfortunately, it is not the exception these days. It is the norm. Listen, the Supreme Court got it wrong. I mean, plain and simple. And it's yet another decision from this Supreme Court that makes it clear that they are on their way to a radical rewriting of the ability for Congress and the ability of the executive branch to keep our communities safe. Listen, everybody who knows anything about a bump stock knows that it effectively turns a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. Through a single pull of the trigger, you can fire multiple rounds. That is the definition in law of a machine gun, and the Supreme Court should have allowed for this regulation put in place by the Trump administration to stay as law. And now with this ruling, once again, you are going to be able to have very deranged individuals like the Las Vegas shooter once again be able to easily modify a semi-automatic weapon in which you can, get off 60 rounds per minute and modify it into an automatic weapon in which you are firing off multiple hundreds of rounds a minute. And that means in these mass shootings, more and more people will die. Lives are going to be cost by the decision of the Supreme Court today.
Senator, I feel like we've been saying this a lot over the last 5 or 6 years, and unfortunately maybe saying it for another 30 or 40. How do we work around the Supreme Court? Because it seems like every time Congress or elected officials make some effort, they cut it off at the knees. What can other branches do in order to sort of provide some gun safety for Americans if the court is consistently opposed?
So it is important to note that this decision on bump stocks is actually not a decision on the scope of the Second Amendment. The Bruen decision, which is a decision from a prior conservative court, did reinterpret the Second Amendment and creates a really confusing new test for district courts in which they have to look at the historical precedent of regulating firearms in this country, which, of course, is very difficult when you have technologies changing very fast. But as it stands today, the Supreme Court has not fundamentally overruled the Heller decision. And the Heller decision says that things like universal background checks and restrictions on weapons like assault weapons are still legal. Now, the Supreme Court may eventually overrule Heller, but for the time being, when states pass assault weapons bans, they are largely upheld by the courts. And unquestionably, when states or the federal government expands background check requirements, which is the intervention that saves the most lives in this country, those are upheld by the courts as well. So we have to be worried about the Supreme Court, but we can pass new laws today and they will pass constitutional muster. So there's no reason for us to wait to pass an assault weapons ban or universal background checks. Let's worry about the court down the line. Let's just choose to save lives right now.
Speaking of the court, one of the most consistent stories we've seen pretty much since last summer is that we have one particular member of the court, many of whom are compromised, but one particular member of the court, Clarence Thomas, has consistently been shown to be basically in the pocket of a Bond villain, Harlan Crow. I mean, he is the puppeteer for everything Clarence Thomas seems to do. He is the Jim Henson to his Kermit, and that is affecting our ability to not just pass legislation, but have that legislation respected. What kinds of reforms do you think the president and Democrats and Republicans who care about democracy should be trying to initiate now to rein this court in and weed out this kind of compromise and corrupt justices?
Yeah, I mean, this is a straight up grift. Right? There's no question what is happening here. Harlan Crow, who is one of the most politically involved multimillionaires or billionaires in the country, who has got a clear political agenda, who has multiple interests before the court, is paying off Clarence Thomas in a multitude of different ways, giving him lavish trips, paying the rent of his mother. We probably have only uncovered the tip of the amount of money that Harlan Crow is directing to Clarence Thomas. And he is not doing that because they are best buddies. This is not a legacy relationship that goes back to their childhood days. He only started giving Clarence Thomas money once Clarence Thomas got in a position to rule on Harlan Crow's interests. What can we do? Well, we can take a look at Supreme Court reform. There are really interesting proposals that would limit the terms of Supreme Court justices. We can impose a statutory code of conduct that would require these justices to report these interactions, that would ban these kind of gifts and would have consequences if they violate the law. So we are not powerless to try to do something about this just extraordinary corruption that specifically Justice Thomas is involved in, and we should get moving on it. And listen, I don't know why this has become a partisan issue. Why do Democrats only care about the corporate corruption of the court? Republicans should care about this too.
Exactly. Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much for your time and coming on tonight on All In.